She was sitting in the dirt with a burlap sack over her head, her dress torn to rags, her skin covered in bruises, and not a single soul in Abilene stopped to help her. That is the first sight Ethan Cole stumbled into on that burning summer day of 1885, and it is the kind of sight that stays with a man forever. Ethan had lived through gunfights, droughts, and graves dug too early, but nothing had ever struck him like this girl. She could not have been more than 21. Yet her body looked broken, like it had carried a lifetime of pain. Barefoot knees scraped raw, her thin arms clutched the sack over her head as if hiding her face mattered more than breathing. Her voice was no louder than a whisper, but it carried all the weight of human despair. "Please do not take it off." That plea was not just fear. It was shame, and it froze Ethan in place. He had seen hard times, but this was something else. She was starved, barely holding on. Her lips cracked, her chest rising shallow. People had walked by, eyes turned away like she was a ghost. But Ethan could not walk past. Something in the way she clung to that sack told him this was no ordinary lost soul. He stepped closer, and the heat of the day seemed to fade under the smell of sweat, dirt, and blood. She looked like life itself had cast her aside, like she'd been left for dead and forgotten. A man over 50 knows when he's looking at a fight already lost. But in her grip, he saw defiance, a will to survive, even if the world hated her for it. In that moment, Ethan felt it. The same ache every man knows when he sees innocence crushed beneath cruelty. He could not explain why, but he knew this girl was about to pull him into a storm bigger than himself. And as the sun baked the town of Abilene, Ethan Cole, a widowed cowboy with nothing left to lose, found himself standing over a secret hidden beneath that burlap sack. A secret that would test his soul and shake the ground he walked on. If you were the one who found her like that, sitting in the dirt with the whole town turning its back, would you walk away? Or would you dare to pull that sack off and face whatever truth was waiting underneath? Ethan did what most men in Abilene would never dare. He lifted that poor girl off the dirt and brought her to his cabin by the Smoky Hill River. The place was nothing fancy, just 4 walls of timber and a roof that leaked in the rain, but it was shelter. He gave her water first, then some bread he had left. She ate like someone who had not tasted food in days, maybe weeks. For a moment, Ethan thought the worst was over. Feed her, give her rest, let her find her strength again. But deep down he knew the burlap sack still hanging over her face was not just cloth. It was hiding something bigger than hunger that night. As the crickets sang and the river carried the summer heat away, Ethan finally said it. "You do not have to keep it on. You are safe here." She froze, hands gripping the sack, breathing sharp like a deer cornered by hunters. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she let him pull the cloth away. And that was when Ethan saw it. A mark stretched across her face, red and raw looking, like a burn that never healed. It ran down from her cheek to her neck, curling in a shape that looked almost alive. In the dim light, it seemed to flicker like flame. Ethan had seen gunshot scars and branding irons leave their mark, but nothing like this. The girl's eyes filled with tears before he even spoke. "Folks say it is the devil's handprint," she whispered. "That is why they threw me out. That is why no one will touch me." Ethan sat there silent, staring not at the mark, but at the girl behind it. He knew the people of Abilene. Hard work, yes, but chained to their superstitions. In a place where droughts and storms took lives without warning, anything strange was branded as a curse. This girl was not cursed. She was just unlucky enough to be born with a face that frightened fools. But here's the thing. Once a town believes a lie, it grows roots deeper than oak. And Ethan was beginning to realize that by keeping her under his roof, he was not just sheltering a lost soul. He was standing against the whole town's belief. The night ended with silence, but Ethan could feel it. Trouble was already on the wind, heading straight for his door. The next morning, the sun was already high when Ethan stepped out to fetch water from the well. The girl was inside, still curled up in his old cot. The burlap sack folded on the floor like it had lost the fight. Ethan's heart felt heavier than he liked to admit. He knew this was not just a matter of kindness, that keeping her here was daring the whole town to come knocking. And it did not take long. Samuel Briggs was the kind of man everyone in Abilene knew, but nobody really liked. He was loud in church, mean with his cattle hands, and quicker to spit than to smile. That day, he showed up at Ethan's cabin, dust on his boots and judgment in his eyes. "I heard you took in a girl, Ethan," he said, leaning on the door frame like he owned it. "Folks say she is the cursed one, the one marked by the devil." Ethan stared back at him, jaw tight. She is just a girl, hungry, bruised, and half dead when I found her. Briggs sneered. That mark on her face. You think God put it there for nothing? If you let her stay, you bring trouble to all of us. You'd better send her away before worse comes knocking. It was the kind of exchange where words were sharper than blades. Briggs wanted fear to do the work for him. But Ethan had seen worse men than Briggs. He had buried them, too. He shut the door in Briggs' face. But he knew it was only the start. When one man like Briggs gets the scent, the whole pack of dogs is not far behind. Inside, Abby had heard every word. Her eyes told the story before her mouth did. She had lived this scene 100 times in 100 places, always ending with her being thrown out. But Ethan's voice stayed steady. You were safe here, he said. And for the first time, she almost believed him. Now, here's the thing. Out west, a man's word could be worth gold or it could be worth dirt. Ethan had just staked his on a girl the whole town wanted gone. That was not just compassion. That was defiance. And when one man stands against superstition, it never ends quiet. If you're still here listening, it means this story has gripped you the way it gripped Ethan that morning. These old Wild West tales carry more than dust and gun smoke. They carry lessons about standing tall when it would be easier to walk away. And if you want more of these stories, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe so you do not miss the rest of this ride. By the next night, the whispers had grown into shouts. Samuel Briggs had done his work well. The town of Abilene was restless, and restless folks gather fast. Ethan heard them before he saw them. A tide of boots and angry voices rolling toward his cabin. When the torches lit up the dirt road, he knew this was no small visit. The whole place had come. Carrying fear like a weapon, they surrounded the cabin, demanding he send Abby out. Their voices rose and fell like a storm. To them, she was no longer a girl, but a curse walking on two legs. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the old Winchester in his hand, his eyes steady as stone. He told them plain, she stays here. She is under my roof. And as long as I live, no one lays a hand on her. The mob pressed closer. Briggs shouted above the rest, calling Ethan a fool, swearing that if the girl stayed, the whole town would burn. Torches inched closer to the walls of the cabin. The crowd had the smell of fire and panic, and Ethan knew words would not break it. He raised the Winchester to the sky and fired. The crack tore through the night like thunder. The torches wavered and the mob froze in its tracks. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunshot. Dust hung in the air, hearts pounding on both sides. Ethan leveled the rifle, not at a man, but at the ground between them, and said only once, "Go home." For a long moment, it seemed no one would move. Then, one by one, shoulders dropped, torches lowered, and boots began to shuffle back down the road. Briggs spat in the dirt, promising this was not the end, and the crowd followed him into the dark. Ethan stood in the doorway until the last light faded. He had won the night. But the war was not over. A man can scare off a mob with one shot, but fear and superstition do not vanish with smoke. Inside the cabin, Abby sat shaking, her wide eyes searching his face for answers he could not give. That night was proof enough. He had chosen to protect her, and now the whole town was choosing to remember it. They had walked away, yes, but Ethan knew better. Trouble was not gone. It was only waiting for its moment to strike again, and Abby was about to make a choice that would change everything. The night after the crowd left, the cabin was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that carried weight. Abby sat by the small window, her fingers tracing the edge of the scarf Ethan's late wife once wore. While Ethan leaned against the door frame, rifle still within reach, the mob was gone, but the threat was not. Both of them knew it. At dawn, Abby stood outside, looking toward the far hills where the sun bled across the horizon. Her voice was soft when she spoke. "I cannot stay, Ethan. They will never let me be. And I cannot let you carry this burden for me." Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her he could stand against the world if he had to. But the look in her eyes stopped him. She had lived with this mark her whole life. She knew better than he did how deep fear can root itself in a town. She stepped closer and placed the scarf in his hands. "If you ever come looking, find the Sangra de Cristo Mountains. That is where I will be." Her words carried a kind of quiet courage that sank deeper than any wound. Then she turned, walking away barefoot across the dusty road, her figure shrinking into the morning light until the town swallowed her whole. Ethan stood there long after she was gone, the scarf clenched in his hands. He had fought off men, faced mobs, even fired into the night to protect her. But in the end, love meant letting her go. It was a loss, yes, but also a promise. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is not to fight harder, but to love stronger. And that is where this story leaves us, with questions only you can answer. If you were Ethan, would you have let her go, or would you have followed her into exile? If you were Abby, would you have stayed and fought or chosen freedom even when it meant walking away from the only person who stood by you? These old Wild West tales still echo today because they remind us that courage is not always in the gun you draw, but in the heart you choose to protect. If this story moved you, give it a like. Let others hear it, too. And if you want more of these forgotten truths from the West, hit that subscribe so you do not miss the next.